Welcome back to Be Fluent in English. Today, we aren't just telling a story, we are embarking on an odyssey. In the 13th century, the world was a collection of isolated islands of civilization. People in Europe knew almost nothing about people in China. They thought the East was filled with monsters, giants, and rivers of gold. But one man decided to walk into the unknown. His name was Marco Polo. His journey lasted 24 years. He traveled over 24,000 kilometers. In this exciting and interesting video, we will discuss the hardships he faced, the wonders he saw, and the controversies that followed him. This is perfect for your English listening because we will use a variety of tenses, the past simple for facts, the past continuous for descriptions, and the present perfect for the impact of his life today. Prepare your ears, and let's start the journey from the canals of Venice. To understand Marco, we must understand Venice. In 1254, Venice was a maritime republic. Maritime means relating to the sea. It was a city of wealthy merchants, beautiful palazzos, and endless canals. Marco was born into this world of trade. However, he grew up without a father. His father, Niccolo, and his uncle, Maffeo, were explorers. They had already left for the East before Marco was born. Imagine being a child and only hearing stories about a father who is thousands of miles away. This created a spark of curiosity in Marco. In English, a spark is a small flash of fire, but metaphorically, it means the beginning of a big idea. When his father finally returned, Marco was 15. He didn't want to stay in school. He wanted to be like them. In 1271, at the age of 17, he convinced them to take him along. The journey didn't start with a plane or a train. It started with a small boat and a huge amount of courage. Their first stop was Acre, in modern-day Palestine. From there, they moved into the heart of the Middle East. Marco was a keen observer. He didn't just walk, he took mental notes. He described the city of Tabriz in Persia as a great market, where merchants from all over the world met. Marco was fascinated by the diversity. He saw people of different religions living together. He saw Armenian Christians, Persian Muslims, and Nestorian priests. For a young man from Venice, this was a cultural shock. As they moved deeper into Persia, Marco heard legends of a group called the Assassins. He wrote about their secret fortress in the mountains and their mysterious leader, the Old Man of the Mountain. He described how they used gardens of paradise to trick young men into becoming soldiers. Whether this story was 100% true or not, it shows Marco's talent for storytelling. Then came the Pamir Mountains. They are often called the roof of the world. The altitude was so high that Marco said fire does not burn as brightly because of the lack of oxygen. He also noticed that meat took longer to cook. This is the first time a European documented the effects of high altitude on the physical world. After the mountains, they faced the greatest challenge, the Gobi Desert. Marco said it took a month to cross. He spoke about the singing sands. Travelers would hear voices calling their names. If they followed the voices, they would get lost and die. Modern science tells us this was the sound of shifting sand dunes, but to Marco, it was a supernatural experience. He had to develop resilience. Resilience is the mental strength to recover quickly from difficulties. He learned to trust the camels. He learned to read the stars. By the time he reached the borders of China, he was no longer a boy. He was a survivor. Finally, they reached the summer capital of the Mongol Empire, Xanadu or Chengdu. The palace was a masterpiece of marble and gold. There, Marco met the most powerful man in history, Kublai Khan. Kublai was the emperor of China and the great Khan of the Mongols. He wasn't a barbaric warrior as the Europeans imagined. He was a sophisticated, intelligent leader. He welcomed the Polos because he wanted to learn about Europe and the Pope. Marco did something very smart. He didn't just speak Italian. He quickly learned for local languages and scripts. Because of his linguistic skills, the Khan appointed him as a special envoy. An envoy is a messenger or representative on a diplomatic mission. For the next 17 years, Marco had a backstage pass to the greatest empire on earth. While traveling for the Khan, Marco saw things that would change his mind forever. He visited Hangzhou, which he called the City of Heaven. He described its 12,000 stone bridges and its clean streets. At that time, Venice was a crowded city. Hangzhou, however, was organized and massive. He wrote about public baths, which were rare in Europe. He wrote about paper money, explaining that the Khan could print wealth from the bark of mulberry trees. In Europe, wealth was only gold. The idea of paper having value was revolutionary. He also saw black stones or coal being used for fuel. He wrote, "These stones burn better and longer than wood." By 1292, the Polos were getting old. They were very wealthy, but they were afraid. If Kublai Khan died, the new leader might not be so friendly. They begged to leave, but the Khan refused. Finally, an opportunity arose. The Khan needed to send a Mongol princess, Kaykachen, to marry a king in Persia. The journey by land was too dangerous, so they went by sea. This voyage was a catastrophe. They sailed through the South China Sea past Vietnam and into the Indian Ocean. Scurvy, storms, and pirates killed almost everyone on the ships. Only 18 people survived out of hundreds. When they reached Persia and delivered the princess, they heard the news. Kublai Khan had died. They were finally free to go home. In 1295, 3 men appeared at the gates of Venice. They were wearing greasy Mongol robes. Their skin was tanned by the sun. They looked like beggars. According to legend, they threw a grand dinner party for their relatives. During the dinner, they took off their dirty clothes and cut the seams. Out poured a river of jewels. The guests were stunned. Suddenly, every noble in Venice wanted to hear Marco's stories. But soon, life took a dark turn. Marco was captured during a sea battle between Venice and Genoa and thrown into a dungeon. In that dark prison cell, Marco met Rustichello of Pisa. Rustichello was a writer of romances and fairy tales. Marco realized this was his chance. He dictated his life's work to Rustichello. The result was a book titled Description of the World. It wasn't just a diary. It was a manual for explorers. It described the geography, the people, and the products of every region. When the book was released, it became the first international bestseller before the printing press. People copied it by hand, but many people called it Il Milione because they thought Marco was telling a million lies. They didn't believe in the size of China or the luxury of the Khan. However, Marco never changed his story. Marco Polo lived the rest of his life as a wealthy merchant in Venice. He married and had 3 daughters. On his deathbed in 1324, his priest and friends begged him to confess that he made everything up. They wanted him to save his soul from the sin of lying. Marco looked at them and said, "I have not told half of what I saw, because I knew I would not be believed." Those were his final words. He died at the age of 70, leaving behind a legacy that would inspire a new generation of explorers. You might ask, why does Marco Polo matter to me in 2026? Without his book, the age of discovery might have happened much later. Christopher Columbus carried a copy of Marco's book on his first voyage to America. He used Marco's maps and descriptions to guide his way. Marco Polo opened the door of communication between the East and the West. He taught us that curiosity is more powerful than fear. He taught us that by learning someone else's language, we can become their friend and their advisor. Let's review some advanced words from today's story to boost your vocabulary. Envoy, a representative sent on a mission. Splendor, magnificent and splendid appearance, grandeur. Dungeon, or dark, underground prison cell. Prosperous, successful in material terms, flourishing financially, unprecedented, never done or known before. Skeptical, not easily convinced, having doubts. The people were skeptical of Marco's stories. Marco Polo's life is a reminder that we are all travelers. When you learn English, you are crossing your own Gobi Desert. Sometimes it is hard. Sometimes you feel like you are not moving. But remember Marco. He didn't have a GPS. He didn't have Google Translate. All he had was his eyes, his ears, and his will to learn. Thank you for watching the video. I hope this story helped your listening skills and gave you some new words to use. See you in the next story.